Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought owning a lakeside property would lead to so much drama, but here we are. My name's Mike, and I've lived in my dream home on Lake Tahoe for the past 5 years. It's a beautiful spot, right on the water with amazing views of the mountains. The house itself is pretty nice too, with 4 bedrooms, an open floor plan, and best of all, a huge infinity pool overlooking the lake. I worked my butt off for years to afford this place. Started my own landscaping business right out of high school. Put in 80-hour weeks for over a decade. Saved every penny I could. It wasn't easy, but man was it worth it when I finally got the keys to this house. I remember standing out on the back deck that first night, looking out at the starry sky reflected in the still water of the lake, and thinking I made it. Of course, a house like this comes with its share of entitled neighbors and tourists who think they own the place, but nothing could have prepared me for Karen. It was a scorching hot Saturday in July. I'd been up since dawn doing yard work, mowing the expansive lawn, trimming hedges, power washing the driveway. By early afternoon I was drenched in sweat and ready for a break. I stripped off my shirt, grabbed an ice-cold beer from the fridge, and headed out to relax by the pool. As I walked out onto the back patio, I immediately noticed something was off. There was a family I'd never seen before lounging on my pool chairs, splashing around in my pool. A middle-aged woman with a "can I speak to the manager" haircut was reclining with a trashy romance novel. A paunchy, sunburned guy I assumed was her husband was snoring loudly on another chair. 2 preteen boys were having a cannonball contest in the deep end. I stood there for a moment dumbfounded. Was I hallucinating from heat stroke? How the hell had these people gotten onto my property? I cleared my throat loudly. Excuse me folks, can I help you with something? The woman, soon to be known as Karen, looked up from her book with an irritated expression. Do you mind? You're blocking my son. I blinked in disbelief. I'm sorry, but this is my private property. You can't just come in here and use my pool without permission. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh please, this is clearly the neighborhood pool for all the lake residents. Now run along and leave us to enjoy our afternoon. Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This isn't a public pool, it's part of my home. I'm going to have to ask you and your family to leave. She sat up, glaring at me. Listen here, you little twerp. We've been coming to this pool for years. I don't know who you think you are, but you have no right to kick us out. Now scram before I call the police for harassment. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Look, I've owned this house for 5 years. This has always been a private pool. I think you must have it confused with the community pool down the road. I'd be happy to give you directions. How dare you? Karen screeched, startling her husband awake. I want to speak to your manager right this instant. I couldn't help but chuckle. Lady, I don't have a manager. This is my home. Stop lying. She was really worked up now, her face turning red. I know the owner of this property, and you are certainly not him. He's a very wealthy older gentleman, not some young ruffian. Now for the last time, leave us alone or I'm calling the cops. At this point I was getting pretty pissed off. Who did this woman think she was? But I figured if she wanted to get the police involved, fine by me. It would make getting rid of these trespassers a lot easier. I shrugged. You know what? Go ahead and call them. I'd love for you to explain to the officers why you're trespassing on private property. Karen seemed taken aback for a moment, like she hadn't expected me to call her bluff, but she quickly rallied, pulling out her cell phone with a victorious smirk. Fine, I will, and you'll be sorry when they haul you off to jail for harassing innocent families. As she dialed cop, I headed inside to grab my deed and other ownership documents, just in case. I could hear her shrill voice carrying from the patio. Hello police? Yes, I need officers sent to the Lake Tahoe community pool immediately. There's a belligerent young man here harassing my family and trying to kick us out of a public space. What's that? No, I don't know the exact address. It's the big pool right on the lake. You can't miss it. I came back outside just as she was hanging up, looking very pleased with herself. The police are on their way, she announced smugly. I hope you're ready to face the consequences of your actions, you hooligan. Great, I replied calmly. Looking forward to it? For the next 15 minutes, we waited in tense silence. Karen alternated between shooting me dirty looks and whispering furiously to her confused-looking husband. The 2 boys had gotten out of the pool and were eyeing me nervously. I just sipped my beer and tried to enjoy the view of the lake. Finally, we heard the crunch of tires on gravel as a police cruiser pulled into my long driveway. 2 officers got out and made their way around to the back of the house. I recognized one of them, Officer Martinez. He'd responded to a noise complaint at my place a couple of years back when a party got a little out of hand. Karen leapt to her feet as soon as she spotted the officers. Over here? She called, waving frantically. This is the troublemaker right here. She pointed an accusing finger at me. Officer Martinez raised an eyebrow as he approached. Afternoon, folks? What seems to be the problem here? Karen launched into a breathless tirade. Officer, I'm so glad you're here. My family and I were just trying to enjoy a peaceful day at our neighborhood pool when this This thug showed up and started harassing us. He claims he owns the place and is trying to kick us out. Can you believe the nerve? We've been coming to this pool for years." The other officer, whose name tag read Anderson, turned to me with a stern look. "Sir, is this true? Have you been causing a disturbance?" I couldn't help but smile. "Officers, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Mike Johnson. I own this property." Officer Martinez's face lit up with recognition. "Oh hey Mike, I remember you. How've you been, man?" "Can't complain," I replied. "Except for, I gestured at Karen and her family. Karen's jaw dropped. "Wait, you two know each other?" Officer Martinez nodded. Sure do. I've been out here a couple times before. Nice place you've got, Mike." I could see the gears turning in Karen's head as she realized her mistake. But instead of apologizing, she doubled down. That doesn't prove anything. He could just be friends with the police. I want to see some real proof of ownership." "Happy to oblige," I said, pulling out the documents I'd grabbed earlier. "Here's my deed, property tax records for the past 5 years, and my driver's license showing this address." Officer Anderson examined the papers carefully, then handed them to his partner. "Everything looks in order to me. This is indeed Mr. Johnson's private property." Karen's face had gone from red to pale. But that's impossible. What about the real owner? The older gentleman?" I shrugged. "No idea who you're talking about, lady. Maybe the previous owner? I bought this place 5 years ago." Officer Martinez turned to Karen and her family, his voice stern. "Ma'am, you and your family are trespassing on private property. I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings and leave immediately." "This is outrageous," Karen sputtered. "We drove all the way here from Sacramento for our annual lake trip. Where are we supposed to swim now?" "There's a lovely public beach about a mile down the road," I offered helpfully, "and a community pool open to all lake residents another mile past that." Karen looked like she wanted to argue further, but her husband finally spoke up. "Honey, I think we'd better go. We don't want to make this situation any worse." She whirled on him furiously. "Shut up, Ron. You're no help at all." Turning back to the officers, she played her final card. "Fine, we'll leave. But I'll be contacting my lawyer about this. You haven't heard the last of me." I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, good luck with that." As Karen and her family gathered up their towels and pool floats, Officer Martinez pulled me aside. "You want to press charges for trespassing, Mike? We can take care of that if you'd like." I considered it for a moment. Part of me wanted to teach Karen a lesson, but ultimately, I decided it wasn't worth the hassle. "Nah, that's all right. As long as they leave and don't come back, I'm satisfied." He nodded. "Fair enough. Give us a call if you have any more trouble. Oh, and maybe think about putting up a fence or some no trespassing signs. Might help avoid this kind of thing in the future." "Good idea," I agreed. "I'll look into that." The officers escorted Karen and her family off my property. As they were leaving, I couldn't resist one parting shot. "Hope you folks have a great rest of your vacation. Don't forget your sunscreen." Karen's only response was a murderous glare as she stomped to her minivan. Once they were gone, I let out a long sigh of relief. Finally, I could enjoy my pool in peace. I dove in, savoring the cool water after my long, hot morning of yard work. As I floated on my back, looking up at the clear blue sky, I chuckled to myself. What a bizarre day. If only that had been the end of it. But Karen, true to her word, wasn't done with me yet. Little did I know, my lakeside oasis was about to become ground zero for a suburban Cold War. The next morning, I was awakened at the crack of dawn by the sound of a car horn blaring repeatedly. Groggily, I stumbled out of bed and went to the window. There in my driveway was a familiar minivan. Karen was leaning on the horn, a manic grin on her face. "Rise and shine, neighbor," she called out when she saw me. "Hope you don't mind, just wanted to make sure you're up bright and early to enjoy this beautiful day." I groaned and shut the window. This was going to be a problem. Over the next week, Karen seemed to make it her life's mission to make me miserable. She'd park at the end of my driveway for hours, blasting horrible music. She'd walk along the edge of my property right up to the line, hurling insults and threats. Once I caught her trying to dump a bag of dog poop in my yard. I called the police a couple times, but there wasn't much they could do. She was careful to stay just on the right side of legal. Officer Martinez suggested I file for a restraining order, which I started looking into. The final straw came about 10 days after the initial pool incident. I woke up to find my entire yard covered in plastic flamingos, hundreds of them, stuck into every inch of grass, and right in the middle of it all was a giant banner that read "Neighborhood Pool Party, all welcome." That tears it, I thought. Time to fight fire with fire. I spent the next few hours making some calls and pulling some strings with clients from my landscaping business. By that afternoon, I had a crew out installing a sturdy iron fence around my entire property. To really drive the point home, I had them mount signs every 10 feet that said "Private property, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted." But I didn't stop there. I also hired a security company to install cameras covering every angle of my property, and contracted with them for 24/7 monitoring. Let's see Karen try anything now. To cap it all off, I decided to throw a giant pool party of my own. I invited all my friends, family, and neighbors, the cool ones, not Karen. We had a blast, swimming, grilling, and enjoying the summer day. I made sure the music was loud enough to carry down the road to where I knew Karen's rental house was. As the party was in full swing, I spotted a familiar minivan creeping slowly past my driveway. I raised my beer in a mocking toast, as Karen glowered at the festivities she was now excluded from. From that day on, I didn't have any more trouble with Karen. I guess she finally got the message that she wasn't going to win this one. Last I heard, she and her family had cut their vacation short and gone back to Sacramento. You'd think that would be the end of the story. Entitled woman gets put in her place, everyone lives happily ever after. But real life is rarely that simple. Karen's misguided crusade against me was just the beginning of a much larger battle over lakefront property rights that would engulf our entire community. And somehow, I found myself stuck right in the middle of it all. It started about a month after the flamingo incident. I was enjoying a quiet evening by the pool when I heard a commotion coming from my neighbor Ted's place next door. Curious, I wandered over to the fence line to see what was going on. Ted, a retired banker in his 70s, was in a heated argument with a younger couple I didn't recognize. As I got closer, I could make out what they were saying. "This beach is public property," the woman was insisting. "You can't keep us from accessing the lake." Ted's face was red with anger. "The hell I can't. This is my private beach. I've owned this land for 40 years. "Maybe so," the man retorted, "but the law says the public has a right to access all lakefront up to the high water mark. You can't block us out." I grimaced, realizing this was likely fallout from my issue with Karen. Word must have gotten around about entitled tourists trying to use private property, and now people were pushing back. "Everything okay over here, Ted?" I called out. He turned to me gratefully. "Mike, maybe you can talk some sense into these people. They're trying to trespass on my beach." The couple looked at me suspiciously. "Are you the one who put up that big fence and all those no trespassing signs?" the woman asked. I nodded. That's right. Had some trouble with trespassers myself recently." The man scoffed. "Well, you should know that's illegal. You can't block public access to the lake." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? Because I'm pretty certain I can do what I want on my own private property." "It's not that simple," the woman insisted. "There are easements and public right-of-way laws. You can't just fence off the entire lakefront." I was starting to get irritated. "Look, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know that I pay a hell of a lot in property taxes for my lake access. If you want to use the lake, there's a public beach a mile down the road." "This is ridiculous," the man fumed. "We're going to file a complaint with the county. You haven't heard the last of this." As the couple stormed off, Ted turned to me with a worried expression. "You think they can really do anything, Mike?" I shrugged, trying to seem more confident than I felt. "I doubt it. Probably just big talk. But maybe we should look into exactly what our rights are, just to be safe." Ted nodded. "Good idea. I'll call my lawyer in the morning, see what he says." I headed back to my place, my mind churning. I had a feeling this was going to turn into a much bigger headache than I'd anticipated. Over the next few weeks, tensions in our Lakeside community reached a boiling point. More and more tourists and locals were showing up, insisting they had a right to access the beach through our properties. Some of my neighbors, like Ted, tried to stand their ground. Others, worried about legal issues, reluctantly allowed people to trek through their yards to the water. I stood firm, keeping my fence up and turning people away. But I was starting to feel like a jerk, and the dirty looks from passers-by were getting old. Things came to a head at the next meeting of our homeowners association. The small community center was packed, with both longtime residents and newer homeowners in attendance. The president, a no-nonsense woman named Helen, called the meeting to order. "All right, everyone, settle down," she said firmly. "I think we all know why we're here. We need to address this issue of lake access once and for all." A chorus of voices erupted, everyone trying to speak at once. Helen banged her gavel loudly. "One at a time? Johnson, you seem to be at the center of this. Why don't you start us off?" I stood up, suddenly aware of all eyes on me. "Look, I think we can all agree that we love this lake and want to preserve it. But we also paid good money for our properties, and we have a right to enjoy them in peace. There has to be a middle ground between completely blocking access and letting people run wild on our land." An older man named Frank spoke up. "When I bought my place 30 years ago, it was understood that the beach was private property. Now we've got all these outsiders coming in and demanding access. It's not right." "But the law is on their side," argued Sarah, a younger homeowner. "Like it or not, we can't legally stop people from accessing the shoreline. We need to figure out a way to manage it before we all end up in court." The debate raged on for over an hour. Some residents wanted to fight tooth and nail to keep our beaches private. Others were in favor of opening up access entirely. It was clear we were deeply divided on the issue. Finally, Helen called for order again. "All right, I think I've heard enough for tonight. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to consult with our lawyer and the county officials to get a clear picture of exactly what our rights and obligations are. In the meantime, I'd like volunteers for a committee to research possible solutions. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks to discuss further. Any volunteers?" I found myself raising my hand, along with Sarah, Frank, and a few others. What was I getting myself into? The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of research and debate. Our committee dug into property laws, environmental regulations, and case studies from other lake communities facing similar issues. We had heated arguments and moments of breakthrough. Slowly but surely, a plan started to come together. At the next homeowner association meeting, we presented our proposal. We would create a designated public access point at one end of our community, with a small parking area and clear path to the beach. Homeowners would maintain private beach rights directly in front of their properties, extending out into the water a reasonable distance. The space between private beach areas would be open to the public to walk along, but not to set up camp for the day. We would form a lake stewardship committee to monitor usage and enforce rules to protect the shoreline ecosystem. A small fee would be charged for non-resident beach use, with proceeds going to maintenance and conservation efforts. There was plenty of debate and some pushback, but ultimately our plan was approved by a narrow margin. We'd have to get approval from the county, of course, but it felt like a big step forward. As the meeting wrapped up, I felt a sense of pride in what we'd accomplished. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a fair compromise that respected both private property rights and public access. I was lost in thought as I walked back to my car, when a voice called out behind me. "Hey Mike, wait up, wait up." I turned to see Sarah jogging to catch up with me. "Nice work in there," she said with a smile. "I think we actually managed to make some progress." "Thanks," I replied. "You too? Couldn't have done it without you keeping us idealists in check." She laughed. Someone had to be the voice of reason. "Hey, you want to grab a coffee? I feel like we should celebrate this small victory." I hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "Sure, why not? I could use some caffeine after all that." As we walked to the nearby cafe, Sarah asked, "So what made you decide to get so involved in all this? You seemed pretty set on keeping everyone out at first." I thought about it for a moment. I guess I realized that just putting up walls wasn't really solving anything. And as much as I love having my own private paradise, I also love seeing people enjoy the lake. It's too beautiful not to share, you know? She nodded. "I get that. It's why I bought a place here too. I just hope we can find a way to balance everything. Access, conservation, privacy. It's not going to be easy." "No," I agreed. "But I think it'll be worth it in the end." We spent the next hour chatting over coffee, swapping stories about lake life and brainstorming ideas for the stewardship committee. I found myself enjoying Sarah's company more than I expected. She was smart, funny, and passionate about the lake in a way that resonated with me. As we said goodbye, Sarah hesitated for a moment. "Hey, this might be a little forward, but would you maybe want to get dinner sometime? I know this great little spot right on the water." I felt a flutter of surprise and interest. "You know what? That sounds great. I'd like that." She beamed. "Awesome. I'll text you, and we can figure out the details." As I drove home that evening, I couldn't help but smile. What had started as a nightmare with an entitled tourist had led to real, positive change in our community. And who knows, maybe even something more. The next few months were a flurry of activity as we worked to implement our new lake access plan. There were meetings with county officials, negotiations with neighboring communities, and plenty of logistical challenges to overcome. But slowly but surely, things started coming together. We designated a public access point at the north end of our community, complete with a small parking area and clear signage. A local landscaper, not me, to avoid any conflict of interest, was hired to create an attractive, environmentally friendly path down to the beach. Homeowners, myself included, adjusted our property lines to allow for a narrow public pathway along the shoreline. It took some getting used to, seeing people stroll past my backyard, but it was a small price to pay for community harmony. The Lake Stewardship Committee, which I ended up chairing, got to work right away. We organized volunteer cleanup days, worked with environmental experts to protect sensitive habitat, and kept a close eye on lake usage to prevent overcrowding. To my surprise, the modest fee we implemented for non-resident beach use was widely accepted. People seemed to appreciate that the money was going directly back into maintaining the area. We even had enough funds to hire a part-time ranger to help enforce rules and educate visitors about lake ecology. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. We still had to deal with the occasional entitled tourist who thought rules didn't apply to them. But now we had a united front and clear guidelines to fall back on. One sunny afternoon in late August, I was out on my deck enjoying the view when I spotted a familiar minivan pulling into the public parking area. My jaw dropped as I watched Karen and her family pile out, loaded down with beach gear. Part of me wanted to rush down there and confront her, but I took a deep breath and decided to watch how things played out. To my amazement, Karen walked up to the information kiosk, read the rules carefully, and even paid the entrance fee without complaint. She and her family made their way down to the public beach section, giving my property a wide berth. I shook my head in disbelief. Maybe people really could change. Later that evening, I met up with Sarah for dinner at her favorite Lakeside restaurant. Over the past few months, our relationship had grown from colleagues to friends to something more. Tonight felt special, a celebration of all we'd accomplished. As we sipped wine and watched the sunset paint the lake in brilliant colors, Sarah raised her glass in a toast. To compromise, community, and new beginnings, she said with a warm smile. I clinked my glass against hers. I'll drink to that. Thinking back to where this all started, with an entitled woman trying to claim my pool, I marveled at how things had turned out. That unpleasant encounter had set off a chain of events that ultimately brought positive change to our entire community. And it had led me to Sarah, someone I was growing to care for deeply. I gazed out at the lake, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. This place had always been special to me. But now, it felt like home in a way it never had before. Not just my private refuge, but a shared treasure, protected and enjoyed by all. As the last light faded from the sky, I turned to Sarah with a contented smile. What do you say we take a moonlight stroll on the beach? She grinned and took my hand. I thought you'd never ask. Together, we made our way down to the shore. Our shore? A place of beauty, compromise, and community, and the starting point of a whole new chapter in my life. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.